Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Language. Today we'll be concentrating on giving you a framework to answer Language Paper 1, Question 2, the language question. This session is to complement your lessons with your teachers and not to replace them in any way. I'm just going to start by revisiting the aims of question 2. And if you remember on the previous video, we looked at what this question was looking for. We are expected to analyse the effects of the writer's choice of language. Again, the words, the phrases, anything the writer has used to create an effect for the reader. And we should be able to use some subject terminology to enhance our answer in the response to this question. In the previous video, we looked at the extract from the monkey's paw, and our question focus was looking at how to create suspense for the reader. Hopefully you've managed to give this a bit of a practice with the extract that I uploaded for you and got some feedback on your approach to this question. For the purposes of this video, we're going to have a look at how to construct that answer. So taking all our planning and turning it into paragraphs so that we can get those marks. There is a 6-step approach to this question. I'm just going to run through these with you now. The first thing we need to do in every paragraph is we need to make a point which is relevant to the question. So any idea that you have about how the suspense was created, that is your point. You should also be able to put in here, if you wish, the method that the writer uses. The method can go here or later, but it has to be somewhere. As soon as you've made your point, you're then going to move down to evidence. Evidence is just the quotations from the text. Remember what I said about being really specific about what areas of the text we are looking at. It's really important that we stick to the lines of the extract that the exam question has asked us to do. Once you've done your quote, you then explain your evidence. So you have to explain how your quote supports your point. This should be the biggest part of your paragraph. The next 3 steps are the biggest. This bit should also be the chunkiest part. The point in the quote should not be bigger than the rest of this paragraph. Next, once you've explained your quote, you need to go back to the quote and pick a word or a phrase out from your evidence that you are then going to analyse. This is really important and it will push your answer up into the higher marks of those 8 marks available. Explain the effects, and then finally, another very important step is that we must link all of this back to the question focus. Otherwise, we're missing out on marks that are really easily gained, and we're not really answering the question if we're not linking back to it. That was a quick run through. I'm going to apply these 6 steps to the paragraph that I've already written, and you will be able to see how this looks, or how it should look, in written form. So this is our paragraph. What we really need to make sure is that when you are writing your answer, it's really important that you do each of these steps. As I said, if you do these 6 steps for each paragraph and you do it well, then you are able to get those top marks, and that's ultimately what we want, isn't it? So a point, if we go back to the first thing, a point is just making a comment about the question or about one of your ideas. In our case, our point here is the writer creates suspense by suggesting how afraid the character is of his situation. Very simple idea, but this is our point. We've given a really clear idea ready for our examiner to understand that we understand the text, and that's ultimately what they are looking for us. What they want to see that we've been able to read it, and next they want to see that we're able to analyse it. So this is our point. Next, we've got some quotations. For the purposes of our response, this example is using a couple of different quotes, but that's because we were obviously talking about a semantic field. It doesn't have to be more than one quote. One quote is fine. For this idea, we are using 3. So quotes in, quote marks, done. So we've got our point, we've got our evidence, and then we have to explain it. This, as I said, is one of the most important, if not the most important part. We have to explain the evidence. So for the next few sentences, you have to explain how your quotations that you've selected support your idea. In our case, so I've mentioned what the method is. So the use of a semantic field of fear conveys just how terrified the character is, with repeated references to his feelings of being scared. This section here is all our explain. Because I'm explaining that it's a semantic field, I've named it, that's great, mark for that. And then I'm talking about what the effect of that is. It shows how terrified he is. I'm throwing it back to my point, suggesting how afraid he is, terrified. So I've linked it there, I've explained the quotations. The next step shows that I can analyse language in a greater detail. So I've picked out one word from one of the ones I've chosen. As I said, if you're using one quote, you just pick a word or a phrase from the quote that you've used, and then you talk about the effects of the choice of that language. So for the purposes of our response, I've talked about that it's a verb, but if you don't know it's a verb, you can just put word or phrase, that's absolutely fine. The verb trembling expresses the involuntary action of the character's body and his inability to control the way he is reacting to a situation. As you can see, I've picked a word out, nice and easy. I've picked the word that I would be able to write the most about. And that's the important thing. Pick out the things that you can write about the effects. Even if you look at it and think, well, it's quite a simple word, that doesn't matter. As long as you write something about the effects, that is where the marks are going to come from. All of this next section here, couple of sentences, that is all our pick out and our effect. As we go through, you can see the effects much larger than any other part of the paragraph, and that's really important that you stick with that. You should be writing a lot about a little. Don't write out reams and reams of quotations. One, it takes up too much time, but it also means that you're not really answering the question, you're just copying things over. So it's really important to write about the effects. And then finally, the very last sentence just links it all back to the question. Remember, our question is about how the language is used to create suspense for that reader. So we need to make sure we're either using the word or very close to the words of the question. This intensifies the suspense for the reader, and the reader feels as we are unaware of what the character will do next or what will happen to him, creating a sense of the unknown. Quite a simple statement, but we've got that key word from the question in there. We've linked everything back to the question as well, and that means that our 6 stages is finished and completed for that paragraph. This is quite a simple response. Some of the words in there may not be the words that you would usually use, but the 6 steps in there are what's important. If you can do the 6 steps in each paragraph, you are hitting everything that you should be using. As I said, if you don't know that things are a verb, or you're not quite sure if you found a semantic field, but you found a quote that you can write effects about, that's absolutely fine. That's what you need to do. Pick out the things that you can write a lot about. The effects are the most important. I'm just going to run through those 6 steps one more time. Make a point, that's the easiest part because you are able to read something and have an idea about it anyway, so that should be the one that you're most confident with. Evidence, another easy step. You're just picking a quotation out of the text to support your point. This is easy because you wouldn't have that point without having read the evidence anyway. So go back through all your workings, all your annotations, and this should be easily selected. Then you explain it. Again, an easy step. You're just explaining how this quote supports your point. Think of it like an argument in some ways. If you make a statement, you've got to prove yourself. And that's exactly what you're doing here. You've made a statement, you're proving it, and you're just explaining that proof. This is where we take it a step further. If you can do these 3 steps, that's what I would practice first. Once you feel confident after number 3, I would then take it a step further where you're going to analyse even deeper. If you're unsure about this, like I said, do the first 3 steps, work with that, and then grow to the next steps. Step 4, you are just going back to that quote. You're going to pick a word or a phrase out, and you're going to analyse it. Talk about the choice of language. Why that word? Why that phrase? What effects does that bring to the reader? Why might a writer use that specific word? Because everything a writer does is on purpose, and we are the reader. So how it affects us is your effects. And then finally, very important, even if you're only doing the first 3 steps instead of the 6, you have to link your response back. Use the phrase, the word from the question. It just ensures your examiner, or your teacher in this case, for the example that you're going to do, that you've answered the question, you've really considered it, and you're able to respond to the question well. So as I said, 6 steps. If you're struggling, you do the first 3. Once you feel confident with that, you can take your analysis further by picking those words out. This will be a skill that you can easily practice, and once you've got it, you'll do exactly what you need to do for this question. I gave you a question at the end of the last video. Hopefully you've managed to do the prep work for that. It would be a really good idea to now take all your annotations and all your work with that question, and using our 6 steps, make sure that you now respond to that question and show your teacher. They'd be really grateful to receive an answer from you, and then you can get some feedback on that.